Hey, welcome back. Um, I thought I'd read this piece. I thought I'd start reading some of my published work, which isn't much, um, but what of it there is pretty shitty. So I hope you enjoy. Um, I'm just kidding. I hope you enjoy it. This is one I wrote that I don't know. It really isn't about much. It was about when the Queen Elizabeth came back for the 400th anniversary of Jamestown, and it was, as you can imagine, it was quite a to do, and changed the city in some ways permanently. Um, we had this wonderful mural of Princess Diana over Shockoe Bottom that, for me as an artist, it functioned as kind of the eyes of Dr. Mecklenburg. If you're a fan of The Great Gatsby, if you know that novel. It was this, constant but benevolent presence. Instead of Big Brother, it was kind of Big Sister. Um, and she was painted on the side of a strip club called Club Velvet, which couldn't be any more ironic, as I will point out in the intro to this piece. But Richmond is the city sister of London, which I didn't know until I moved back here later as an adult. Lived here off and on my whole life. As have different members of my family. Um, without further ado, this was about the afternoon of the fireworks show for the 400th anniversary. And of course, I was plugged into the food service community down there and knew that through some of them who worked in catering that the Queen was indeed still in town, moving around with people like Zeus. And that she had bought a property on Monument Avenue, where just a few years later, um, we would see all the monuments get toppled down and see the center of the city be sort of turned into a garish spray painted scar that's remained that way to this day. Welcome to Richmond. This is the Return of the Queen. It features some pretty famous, pretty legendary Richmond characters too. Some of whom I'm very proud to have called my friend while they were still alive, like Kenny Green. At any rate, why don't we go meet him? Coming into Shockoe Bottom from out of town, you had to take the Franklin Street exit from I-95 South, and then make an immediate left turn at Diana Steam. Diana Steam is the name Hippie John gave the portrait of Princess Diana that Ed Trask painted on the blank Main Street facing wall of Club Velvet. It was an exact likeness, except for her nose, which was disproportionately large in a way that Hippie John believed could never have been accidental. According to him, Diana Steam is the only culturally accurate symbol of Richmond, Virginia, which was and has always been a city of pimps and would-be gentlemen, and of princesses and whores. Those directions into the bottom don't work anymore. Diana Steam's gone, and the Franklin Street exit got shifted a couple blocks to the west to accommodate the third in a trio of matching monuments erected to commemorate the horrors of slavery. The other two monuments stand in Liverpool, England, and in Benin, West Africa. Club Velvet's gone now, too, replaced by something cleaner, and with it, the big twin World War II era rooftop Klieg lights that used to finger the skies above town in search of phantom zeppelins. The removal of Diana Steam was just a nuance of the city's grander gesture of bending over and puckering up for the arrival of the Queen, who promised to attend the 400th anniversary celebration of how the Commonwealth of Virginia was discovered by Englishmen, descendants of their former slaves and servants, dressed in work boots and day-glow vests and yellow resin hats. Descended on the river bottom in a mechanized division of cherry pickers, cranes, and bucket loaders, moving from project to project like a swarm of Japanese hornets. First, they painted over Diana Steam. They painted the whole wall just as black as the space among the stars at about the time it took most people to fix breakfast. Then the street sweepers crawled the grid between Main and Broad Streets, gradually foam brushing the cobblestones free of 20 years' worth of urine, spilled beer, vomit, and dumpster nectar. Men on foot walked the alleys, gathering litter with telescopic boom grabbers. Zebrats towing liberated the abandoned vehicles, and even a few that weren't abandoned. Cops harassed the lingering winos, weed dealers, and journeyman junkies, including ones who'd become Richmond institutions and as such were considered part of the essential furniture of Shockoe Bottom. Finally, the city called in the heavy earth-moving machines to relocate the incoming Franklin Street exit ramp from I-95 south in order to free space for the new slavery reconciliation statute. That operation snarled traffic for more than a week on East Main Street through Shockoe Bottom. Even Dancing Pops, the one resident of the bottom who was terminally pedestrian, could feel the deep significance of the changes. Dancing Pops was the undisputed mayor of Shockoe Bottom. His Christian name was Kenny Green, but everyone in the bottom and in Richmond at large knew him as Dancing Pops. The nickname he earned for his ecstatic mantis-style karate ballet he employed to direct traffic through the intersection of 18th and Franklin at night on the weekends, or whenever the spirit moved him. Sometimes the city has a voice unconnected to microphones and news cameras, unconnected to any office or policy or project or status or lineage. A single human voice that weaves all the other disparate, comic, tragic voices of the city together the same way nature causes purple martins to fly in synergistic formation, to cease being merely a flock of birds and to become something even more beautiful. Dancing Pops was that voice in Shockoe Bottom, so much so that there were moments when it seemed as if the architects and masons who rebuilt Richmond after the Civil War had been able to foretell his birth somehow, and had planned their work accordingly, with the register of his voice in mind, placing each wall and alley and archway and portico just so, to maximize the carriage of its echo. It was among the sounds you expected to hear in Shockoe Bottom, and if you were a full-time resident of none such, the sudden absence of Pop's voice could be enough to put you on edge. He'd arrive like a mellifluous melody rising from the distance, a progression of notes indistinguishable from pure music except for the stops and the poetic cadence of his rap rising and falling in Doppler, drawing closer and closer until the language became discernible again. "Man, they tearing Main Street all to hell," he bellowed to the boys on the wall outside the Franklin Street supermarket on the morning of the big fireworks show. "I saw him painting Club Velvet, too. Painting up Diana Steen. What the F's going on?" "Queen's coming, Pops," Hippie John said. "Didn't you hear?" Hippie John was a journeyman junkie, a relic from the 60s who squatted on the third floor of the coal and wax factory. You could see the revolution still smoldering in his eyes, which were a piercing, iridescent grayish blue, and which sparkled out at you like Piscian cenotes beneath the jungly twin hedgebanks he had for eyebrows. He wore a shaggy, unkempt beard and a mustache, too. He looked how Santa Claus might have looked had he drifted into the Yucatan in his 20s on a vision quest that never paid off. "Say what?" "The Queen's coming." Pops thought about that for a second. He furrowed his brow. "The Queen? From Godfrey's?" "No, man, the Queen of England. The Queen. The Queen." "Oh, shit. You mean the one that looked like George Washington?" "That's the one." Pops pondered the gravity of the news. "Jesus Christ almighty. What in the world is she coming here for? What the F she want with little old us?" "She's here for the anniversary of Jamestown," John said, then as an afterthought. "And to present Dirt Woman with the keys to the city of London." "Do what now?" It had occurred to Hippie John that the Queen would likely sit for an audience with all the local dignitaries except one, Dirt Woman. That seemed like a damn shame, and by Hippie John's estimation, a waste of a fine opportunity to foster an honest dialogue between the sister cities. Just two queens kicking it. "After all," Hippie said, "Dirt Woman's the only real queen this town's ever had." "Shit," Pop said. "I know that's right." "Paper said she left the country yesterday," Hippie John said. "Queen, you know. But she's actually still in town. I have it on good authority she's been shopping for property on Monument Avenue. And later she's going to watch the fireworks from the deck of a small yacht docked off Rocket's Landing. Incognito, man, just like Zeus among the hoi polloi." Dirt woman? No, man, the queen. She's going to be in disguise. How anybody going to know who she is then? They're not, Pops. That's the whole point. It's like when Michael Jackson goes shopping, he doesn't want the fans mobbing him and shit. So he leaves the gloves at home. It's the same thing. Pops frowned. No, it ain't, man. Not really. But I feel you. I think we should prepare some kind of gift for her, a nice tribute. Yeah, that's a good idea. I'm down. How are we going to give it to her, though, man, if we can't tell who she is? We'll think of something, Hippie John said. I bet Nightfly will have some ideas. If he don't, Pop said, we might have something good to smoke. It took them less than a half an hour to awaken and then recruit Nightfly, the bottom's resident bush pharmacist, and to reintroduce the topic of finding a tribute for the Queen. He did, in fact, have something good to smoke, and they sat in a triangle around the picnic table in the courtyard under the mulberry tree behind Zuppa, smoking it. Nightfly didn't have any immediate ideas. Happily, though, he had half a sheet of fresh blotter acid, part of which they enjoyed for brunch with a beer from the secret cooler stashed under the interior courtyard stairwell. They used to give visiting royalty a deer, a buck. The Pamunkeys did, Hippie John said. Do we look like some effing Indians? Pop said. What the F we gonna do? Where are we gonna find a deer down here at Shockoe Bottom and us tripping? There's plenty on the north bank, Nightfly said. Right along the canal locks, man. I've seen them at Texas Beach, too. Sometimes when I forage shrooms. You gotta go early in the morning, though. And yeah, it's bad to hunt tripping. It doesn't have to be a deer, Hippie John said. It just has to be something meaningful. Like? Like what? Dylan, the line cook, joined them presently on a cigarette break from his shift in the grill at Zuppa. He couldn't help overhearing. They used to give beaver pelts, I think, he said. Dylan was a real problem solver. If you can find a beaver pelt anywhere between here and the bay, Hippie John said, man, I swear I'll... And he drifted off internally, in search of some appropriately dire assurance. He heard a noise in the tree above him and tilted his head back to see what it was. High in the canopy of the mulberry tree, a cardinal hidden somewhere in the whorled kaleidoscope of branches sang out 3 times to stop. The sun washed across the tops of the branches like warm butterscotch icing, lacing the edges of the leaves with little diamonds where dew lingered from an early morning rain. The entire universe smelled like bacon and hamburgers grilling, as if all of Shockoe Bottom were having a neighborhood barbecue. You what? Pop said. Shit, I don't know, man, Hippie John said. Be pretty freaked out, I imagine. Far out. The acid had started to register. 20 minutes later, all of their communication became monosyllabic and gesticular. An hour later, they weren't any closer to thinking of a tribute for a queen that would be properly meaningful. It wasn't that they had abandoned their loftier goals for the day. It's that they had discovered a willingness to approach those goals circuitously, with a measure of creativity and wit, if not outright hilarity. Thus reoriented, they made their way back out into the open glare of summertime in Shockoe Bottom to find an inspiration for a proper tribute with which to mark the return of the Queen, the one who looked like George Washington. It was almost 4 o'clock, and the early happy hour dinner crowd began to trickle in. Suburban dilettantes walked among the cobblestone lanes in their matching family units. Men forced artificially confident bank teller smiles. Women grimaced, fidgeting through poorly suppressed waves of moral panic. Children in matching spandex clustered at their parents' legs in slack-jawed amazement. Look at the silly man, Daddy. Yes, he's a very silly man. Come on along now, sweetie. Don't touch anything, okay? Questing knights made their way up and down 18th Street, assembling costumes on the fly from donated items and found objects. Their booty comprised 3 discarded party hats, a magenta boa, and 3 pink and purple leis from a dumpster behind Tiki Bob's, whose parking lot had been the setting of a Tiki Lounge-themed wedding reception. The bride had selected a pink and magenta color scheme just the day before. Dylan, who had half emancipated from the afternoon shift at Zuppa with a well-timed, poorly executed 3-strip of LSD, turned a headless mop stick into a drum major's mace, top of which he secured the jingle bells dancing Pop swiped from the front door of the Franklin supermarket when Jimmy, the manager's back was turned. Pops wore a bright and white bright green and white jester's hat that he borrowed from Nightfly, and a Polynesian print collared shirt with a big pot leaf on it. They resembled a union of failed clowns, or a trap house of successful ones. Thus festooned, they prowled the neighborhood with a renewed sense of glee and amiable purposelessness. They were irrepressibly joyful. First, they played hide and seek with the new surveillance cameras the city had installed in the light post at the intersection of 18th and Franklin, popping out from behind cars like clownish jack-in-the-box to moon it or flip at the bird. Then when they got bored with that game, they serenaded Tom the philanthropist, who eventually, against all better judgment, lowered them down a thermos of gin, one he had left over from a fundraiser he organized to support the Richmond Ballet, and a stack of little red halo cups from a second-story apartment window above Zippa. By and by, they were joined by Rob the Pitcher, too, James, and the three wise men, who doubtless smelled the gin all the way from their spot on the wall across the intersection at the Franklin supermarket. And they all drank gin and took turns playing town crier up and down Franklin Street, while the fat old sun dipped behind Union Market Hill, electroplated copper rainbows along the edges of the rapids on James River Falls. By that time, the boys still hadn't decided on an appropriate tribute for the Queen, though their cohort grew steadily by the hour as they made their way through Shaka Bottom, soliciting advice and good cheer from men and women of influence in the village, many of whom, having no useful advice but also no dearth of enthusiasm for the spirit of their cause, simply dropped what they were doing and joined them in their circuitous soft parade up to Libby Hill Park. As sunset lit the great chrome cantilever at the top of City Hall, the troop started slowly up Churchill, an accidental confederacy of food service freaks, freelance shaman, and street poets dancing in loose procession up Franklin Street from the land of Diana Steen. They were the newly dispossessed children of Nonesuch, adrift now without a princess or even a decent tribute for her replacement queen, all oblivious to how that might manifest in retrospect as a semicolon scrawled across the sky in smoke and glittering ash, to mark a sort of beginning to the end of something unique that had yet to even be clearly defined. The panicked urgency of rush hour was long gone, its energy supplanted by an anticipation you could taste on the air, a composite scent gathered from the ceiling vents of 100 grills, in 100 bisque-steamed kitchens, from the oily roach ends of 100 smoldering honey-brushed blunts, gesticulating blue arabesques into the rooftop crosswinds and balcony breezes of Nonesuch, from the commingled smudge bundle vapors of the unseen medicine woman, the ancestral clan mother of Flat Rocky Place, Grandmother Shako herself. Questing knights and their throng of merrymakers made a loose procession up Franklin Street to Libby Hill Park with dancing pops, high-stepping the gong cadence out front, carrying aloft his makeshift royal jingle bell staff, thrusting it skyward in perfect time with the rhythm of a march only he could hear, and Hippie John cavorting all about like some vernal lord of misrule, twirling a fence post, repurposed as a baton, yelling, "God save the Queen! Hear ye, God save the Queen!" Behind their procession, in the near distance above the rooftops across 18th Street, the Art Deco towers of financial Richmond loomed, devoid now of all dimension, flattened back by dust to the basic elegant shapes of shadow obelisks descending from distant hills like so many steps on a giant staircase to nowhere. Forms snatched intact from the most colorless dreams of the most cynical industrial-era capitalists, arranged now against this twilight's powder blue luminescence like seasonal cutouts tacked to a kindergarten bulletin board. Above their jagged horizon, 10,000 purple martins coalesced to form a single purple dragon that was a city block in length and made long, low arcs that dipped to the street level over 17th Street before corkscrewing up to surf the thermocrines, radiating up from the crumbled chimney wetlands and CSX yards, past the Lumpkin jail site and the unmarked slave cemetery beneath the convergence of I-95 and I-64. The merry company processed up the hill out of Nonsuch behind the convent wall and then through the park toward the Confederate Naval Monument, the steps on the riverbank below Libby Hill, where all of suburban Richmond had gathered from the Fan and the West End and the western soul-killing monotony of Short Pump for the big 400th anniversary fireworks show. Hippie John selected a spot on the grass in the meadow for the questing nights. Place he imagined Poe himself might have chosen, away from where the crowds packed together on the steps, where no one else wanted to sit because of how the trees obscured the view of the river from that angle. This, he said, is perfect. What about all the branches, Pop said? Won't the trees all be in the way and shit? It'll be beautiful, Hippie John said. You'll see. The trees will give it imperfection. It'll be Japanese, you know? With the flares floating down through the branches. It'll be beautiful. You'll see. They all agreed it was worth a try, if only to avoid the crowds who'd packed in tight along the hillside in the radiant heat of the stone steps beneath the Naval Monument, front to back like a herd of pack animals. And as the fireworks dropped, incandescent lotus blossoms that floated slowly down through the canopies of oak along the cusp of Churchill, like paper lanterns and Japanese paintings, the band of knights errant stretched out on the cool turf along the hillside to watch the show, each of them suddenly serene in the knowledge, without any of them even having to say so, that they themselves were the appropriately meaningful tribute they had been looking for all along. And thanks for joining me. Tune in next time for Next Thing. And if you'd like to check out a print version of this and read it with your own voice, read it in your own brand, I'm going to put a link in the description. So enjoy. Thanks for joining me.